What unites Rishi Sunak?
What did you go without as a child?
Lots of things, right?
Can you give me an example?
All sorts of things. So, like lots of people, there'll be all sorts of things that I would have wanted as a kid that I couldn't have, right? Famously, Sky TV. So that was something that we never had growing up.
And Kier Starmer.
My dad was a toolmaker. He worked in a factory. It's true.
They are leaders who tried to play the underdog card, and it did not go well. Hi, I'm Glenn from Speak Life. We like to see all things through the lens of Jesus. We've always wanted our leaders to come from the right stock, but what the right stock is has changed. We used to look for nobility and royalty, class. Now those things prove an obstacle. And so Rishi Sunak, the richest prime minister in history, who with his wife has more money than the king, frames his story like this.
Let me tell you a story about a young woman almost a lifetime ago who boarded a plane armed with hope for a better life and the love of her family. This young woman came to Britain, where she managed to find a job, but it took her nearly a year to save enough money for her husband and children to follow her. One of those children was my mother, age 15.
Now, people have always cared about the origin stories of their leaders, but for 2,000 years, we've been telling a story of rags to riches that takes some beating. From king of the cosmos to penniless nobody executed in agony, Christians have been telling the story that this guy is the leader of leaders, the Lord of Lords and King of Kings. And we've been telling stories ever since about smelly shepherds who are braver than all the toffs, and they sacrifice for love and win the day through epic struggle. Other cultures have stories about rags to riches, but no societies have had such a king descend to such depths to have such a cosmic effect. And it makes us resonate particularly with rags to riches stories. So here's how an ITV journalist grilled Sunak last week.
What did you go without as a child?
We went out with lots of things, right? Because my parents wanted to put everything into our education, and that was a priority.
So what sort of things had to be sacrificed?
Lots of things, right?
Can you give me an example?
All sorts of things. So, like lots of people, there'll be all sorts of things that I would have wanted as a kid that I couldn't have, right? Famously, Sky TV. So that was something that we never had growing up.
We are very interested in Sunak's lived experience, and we want to know if Sunak has struggled or gone without. That's why there's desperation in Rishi's eyes. He's searching for something, anything, that could be spun as a rags to riches tale. Does he have the underdog card somewhere? And so he fixes on a lack of Sky TV, the equivalent of cable for US viewers, and that's all he can come up with. Poor Rishi. He's so rich, the one thing he lacks is a credible claim to poverty. The irony is, in this situation, it's poverty that would actually be valuable to him. Well, Kier Starmer, the Labour leader, is from different stock. It's true that both party leaders were educated at Oxford, and Starmer did go to a fee-paying independent school, but it was nowhere near as expensive as Rishi Sunak's Winchester College. And as Kier has said many times, his father was a toolmaker and his mother was a nurse. All together now.
Dad was a toolmaker. My dad was a toolmaker. And he was a toolmaker. He was a skilled man.
My dad, he was a toolmaker.
Now, Kier Starmer's working class credentials are much more credible than Sunak's. His mother was chronically ill during his childhood and had to stop work, and Starmer was the first in his family to go to university. But the kid done good. From not quite rags, he became director of public prosecutions and grew to a certain level of riches. A millionaire, you might say. Or might not. Starmer is very hesitant to say it.
Are you a millionaire?
No, I'm not a millionaire. I haven't got
Really?
that kind of earnings.
Where do
No,
you
of course
live?
I haven't.
What sort of house do you live in?
I live in a house in North London.
What's it worth?
It's probably worth over $1 million now. I didn't pay $1 million for
So
it.
you're a
I
millionaire.
paid-
We hate to think of our leaders as out of touch, and our leaders are desperate to present themselves as men and women of the people. And so we keep hearing the rags part of the rags to riches, but not really riches story.
You live in a property worth over £1 million. How much do you earn?
I live in North London in a house which didn't cost £1 million, and I'm paying off the
it's
mortgage
worth-
like
you just
many,
said it's worth over £1 million. You're
many,
worth
many
right.
other people.
But if you live in a
Like
house
many,
over
many
£1 million, you are one of the elite you profess to hate.
But there's something else we don't like. We don't like spin, hypocrisy, virtue signaling. We don't like mask wearing. So when Kier made his claim just one time too many last week, here's what happened.
I accept I earn a lot of money in the job I am now in, but when I grew up, my dad was a toolmaker. He worked in a factory. It's true. My mum was a nurse, and actually we couldn't make ends meet, which actually isn't a laughing matter. We couldn't make ends meet.
Kier was alarmed at the jeering at the time, and later he expressed even more displeasure.
Looking at last night's debate with Sky News, the crowd laughed when he said, your dad's a toolmaker. Why is that? Do you think you've got nothing more to say? Are they getting tired of the same comment?
Let me directly address you on that. My dad worked in a factory all his life. He felt people disrespected him.
Oh.
And
that's not happening with the laughing.
I do want to see this through, because it actually hit a nerve last night.
Yeah.
Because he felt that in the usual conversation, when someone says, what do you do for a living, socially, he would say, I work in a factory. And there'd be a pause where nobody quite knew what to say. And he felt really disrespected. It caused him in his life to withdraw from social engagements. He didn't do it much later in life because it was raw to him that he should be disrespected because he worked in a factory. So when someone laughed last night, my dad would have turned in his grave.
So here we have Starmer trying to play the underdog card, and I don't know, I've seen claims online that perhaps his father was a factory owner and not just the toolmaker within the factory. To be honest, that question is beside the point. For my purposes, even if he is a total underdog, here is a dynamic that I see everywhere: mask tearing. We hate mask wearing, and so we go about mask tearing. We hate virtue signaling, so we have our cynicism guns pointed at any and every suggestion of it. We are on a hair trigger, looking to gun down virtue signaling at the earliest opportunity. We've become a people of mask wearing and mask tearing, and quite often we manage to do both at once. Remember back in 2019, David Cameron published his memoirs and spoke movingly about his 6-year-old son Ivan, who died after battling severe epilepsy and cerebral palsy all of his short and agonizing life. In 2019, a major newspaper ran and then quickly retracted an editorial that dismissed Cameron's grief as privileged pain. They suspected that Cameron was unfairly playing the underdog card, and he wasn't allowed to play the underdog card. After all, he is a distant relative of the Queen, he went to Eton, he went to Oxford, and when we're in mask-tearing mode, all we can see when looking at David Cameron is a privileged man wearing a mask of underdog status. And so in mask-tearing mode, we go to work deconstructing and dismissing his story of pain. But think about it. If David Cameron is simply privileged, then his son Ivan must be privileged too, right? He was also related to the Queen. He was the son of a Tory party leader, no less, who would go on to rule the country. Surely Ivan Cameron was born into privilege, wouldn't you say? I mean, sure, he had 20 or 30 seizures a day lasting for minutes or sometimes hours. His small frame was racked with spasms and searing pain, but they were privileged seizures, privileged spasms. By the end of the day, his clothes would be drenched in sweat, but of course his clothing was designer label. His sweat, royal. His agony and death, a privileged agony and death, right? See, it doesn't work, does it? And a moment's thought with anything like a human perspective reveals that it doesn't work. And notice the assumption. Some of our leaders are privileged, but we are not? Here's a reality check. If you live on more than $30 a day, about £8,500 a year, you are wealthier than 84% of the world's population. Who are the privileged? While ever we think about mask wearing and mask tearing, we involve ourselves in a horribly divided and duplicitous vision for life. I'll always be trying to play my underdog card, and knowing how the game is played, I'll be ready to call your bluff when you play it. How can we find a better way? Let's think about this. Let's think about what unites us rather than what divides us. If we're talking about lived experience, then we are all walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And all the privilege in the world cannot save us. Let that teach us humility and a common humanity. At the same time, we are also incredibly blessed. We've all come from nothing. That is my story. That's your story. We've all come from nothing. And we've been offered this unbelievable privilege called life. We've also been given the gift of heavenly life for free. We get from rags to riches because of Christ, the one who was rich, who stooped to our poverty, so that we through his poverty might become rich. He's the great hero, so that we don't need to pretend to be that. So quit wearing masks. Mask wearing is foolish and people see through it. But mask tearing, if that is your universal practice, is not right either. If you see through everything, you'll end up being blind. If you're suspicious of all virtue signaling, you'll start being suspicious of the real thing. And that's the horrible cycle that we're in. We claim victim status when we're privileged, and we bully the privileged when they're actually victims. We practice mask wearing and mask tearing all at the same time. But what if I'm weak and so are you? And what if I'm privileged and so are you? To use biblical categories, I'm in Adam, the same as you, weak, perishing, compromised, sinful, hypocritical, fallen, dying. I'm walking through the valley of the shadow of death, and so are you. We are all in that category. Those are the rags that we all wear. But I'm also in Christ. And you're invited to be in Christ, whoever you are. And in this gracious reality, robed in Him, I am blessed, forgiven, filled, enriched, adopted into the royal family of God without ever earning any of it. I go from rags to riches, all because Christ went from His riches to our rags. Here's a much healthier perspective, but it begins not with division and duplicity. It begins by saying we are all in the same boat, the Adam boat. Perishing and weak. Those are our rags. But if we only drop the mask, we can receive Christ, and robed in Him, we have a privileged reality beyond anything we could earn. From this perspective, we can own our rags and we can rejoice in our riches, because we've all got plenty of both. If you want to know more about this Christian story of Adam and Christ, 321 is just the course for you. It presses into the Christian story of life shaped by two representatives, Adam and Jesus. The whole thing can be binged in a couple of hours, or you can do it over 8 sessions. There are stunning animations, deep questions to consider, plenty of bonus content, and a chat community. Go to 321course.com and start an account. In seconds, you're in. If you're a Christian, you'll love it. If you're not yet a Christian, be careful. You might just become one at 321course.com. And if you're still with us, you must really like this video. Give it a like, please share it around, and subscribe to the channel so that we can catch you on the next one. See you then.